Hi, I'm Micah Halpern. Thank you for joining me today as I do some thinking out loud. Our first segment is called Background Briefing. I've been thinking about anti-Semitism. There's been an ugly, despicable rise of anti-Semitism in the summer of 2014. Anti-Semitism has taken a form that I thought no longer existed in the modern world, and certainly no longer existed in centers of culture of our Western world. There used to be a joke. How do you know where the local synagogue is in any European city? Go to the neighborhood, and once you get there, look for the police. They'll be standing outside and on the street corners. Today, that's not a joke. It's more than true. That said, there is much of this anti-Semitism which is based on historical hatred of the Jew. And so it's worth showing and articulating part of that history, what really is traditional Jew hatred, and how it blends with today's anti-Semitism, or what we're seeing today. It's important. Traditional Jew hatred is based on three basic canards. The first is called blood libel. Blood libel is a canard that Jews murdered a Christian child and extracted its blood for the baking of matzah. This was a terrible, terrible canard, a lie, hence the word libel, blood libel. And for centuries, this was one of the major reasons for pogroms that took place in Europe. The reason Jews opened their doors on Passover during the Seder, by the way, is because of this blood libel. They opened their doors so that others could see in and witness that they did not have Christian children sacrificing them and exacting their blood for the baking of matzah, for the eating of matzah. Evidence in court was testified by experts in Judaism in the Middle Ages that said, well, matzah has those brown dots on it, and it's the same color as dried blood. There are examples in art and literature. We see woodcuts of blood libels. We have images in art, even in churches. We have images in frescoes across the board. We can find them. Even in Chaucer, we have it. The reason behind the blood libel's choice of a child, by the way, is very interesting also, because the child is sinless. And as a result of that, the Jews are reenacting the murder of Jesus, which is why that blood libel takes such strength and why it's such a terrible, terrible lie. The next example is that of poisoning of the wells. Now, this is based on Jews using vials and contaminating the drinking water of Christian Europe. The entire lie was an attempt to explain the Black Plague, also known as, of course, the bubonic plague. But in reality, the plague was spread by a parasite which was carried on rats. We know that today. And they should have known it then. You see, this is the only myth, just as an aside, this is the only myth where we can actually date a real beginning. There are disputes about when and who was the first blood libel and where that took place. But in 1348 and 1349 is the time of the Black Death, the time when Black Death, the Black Plague, the bubonic plague enveloped Europe. And in a certain way, 1 in every 3 Europeans died. A third of Europe. Jews died too, but much less. Probably closer to 1 in 5 or 1 in 6. There were several important issues, but the Christian community, by the way, was trying to understand why it happened. They didn't look to see. They just guessed this to be the case. The issue here was that Christians were dying. Interestingly, fewer Jews died because they washed their hands before eating. Every Jew does. It's a standard Jewish ritual from the time of the temple, actually from the time of the Bible. Judaism and that ritual of washing your hands actually saved Jewish lives during the bubonic plague. It was proper hygiene. The next major canard of traditional Jew hatred is called host desecration. This was the idea where Jews reenacted the deicide, the murder of Jesus. In Catholic ritual, which is the type of Christianity that existed in Europe, the ritual body of Christ was represented by that wafer. and blood by the goblet of wine. So each participant partakes in the process symbolically by consuming the wafer and drinking the wine. So Jews supposedly, in order to perpetrate this host desecration, broke into cathedrals and churches and ritually stabbed what's known as the Eucharist, that wafer, symbolizing the body, and killed Jesus again, just like they did in Jerusalem. That's the image. Modern anti-Semitism is a new phenomenon. It's different. Hence, a different word was created. It was coined by a character named Wilhelm Marr in 1879. He put the word together, anti-Semitism. It didn't exist before Wilhelm Marr. Coining a new term, it's actually very exciting when you can actually find the first time a word is being used and who made it. In German, it's actually really easy to make up new words. You take a prefix, add it to a noun, create a word with another suffix. You put many nouns together. Marr took the prefix anti, which means against, and then he took the word Semite from the new science of philology and etymology. Philology is the science of word development, right? Language development. Philology categorized Semitic languages as all those languages that came from the area of the Middle East. They named Semitic after Shem, one of the three sons of Noah. So all Semitic languages have three-letter roots, let's say, and they're written from right to left. Marr took that and created a new word, not Semitic, but Semite, and applied it to Jews. And the new form, this new anti-Semitism, showed Jews dramatically different than the traditional Jew hatred. Now Jews were controlling the world. They were so powerful. It's a whole different kind of phenomenon that Marr and others like him wanted to create. Today, anti-Semitism is a combination of Marr, the new version of anti-Semitism, and old hatred of the Jew. It also includes anti-Jewish beliefs held by Muslims, and just sheer xenophobia, which is, of course, the fear of strangers. Today, the Arabic press is filled with these gruesome images. Websites are replete with images. The Arabic version also combines traditional Jew hatred with anti-Semitism, where Israel and Zionism embodies the Jew. They are all powerful, these Jews, as depicted in this anti-Semitic world, and they control the world itself. In many ways, it's a little frustrating to try to combat it because you're dealing with an age-old hatred with a new phenomenon, a new almost science of anti-Semitism, a culture of anti-Semitism. Who would have imagined that we would be experiencing this today, so long after the Holocaust? But we are, and it is deeply, deeply disturbing. Coming up next, points of view. Here's what some important voices have been talking about. First up is a column by Andrea Peyser in the New York Post, Fiddling as Hatred Burns. It was published on Friday, October 17th. Andrea Peyser is a columnist for the New York Post. She is a powerhouse, a real strength. More than anything, she is the conscience of her readers. She steps forward and she calls leaders to task. Andrea Peyser is actually the daughter of parents who were born in Vienna, and they moved to Israel. They met in the Israeli army and then moved to the United States, where Andrea was born in New York City. She spent time at AP, the Associated Press, and even at CNN before she joined the New York Post and became a columnist in 2003. Now, in some circles, especially in some liberal circles, Andrea Peyser is considered evil. Nothing she writes can be seen as good or insightful. I disagree. She is sometimes way over the top, but often very insightful. Peyser engages with ideas in order to truly affect change. And yes, she ruffles some feathers. Actually, I get the sense that Andrea Peyser likes to ruffle people's feathers. Peyser begins, "Will the last Jew to leave France please blow out the Shabbat candles? Oh, I know that failing to let the lights burn out on their own is a religious no-no, but this is serious. Here, actually, Pizer is making fun of a Golda Meir joke about Ben Gurion Airport, which is, at that time, was called the Lud Airport. Golda said in response to criticism of her government and of her, she said, "Will the last one out of the Lud Airport please turn off the lights?" In this particular case, Pizer is asking, who's in charge? Just like the question that Golda was asking. Pizer continues, an unprecedented number of the chosen people are heading to the exits in the Gallic state, spooked by spikes in anti-Semitic attacks occurring all across Europe, of a kind not seen since the 1930s era Germany. In May, a man opened fire with a Kalashnikov rifle inside the Jewish Museum in Brussels, killing 4 people. In Liège, Belgium, a cafe owner erected a sign saying that dogs were welcome, Jews were not. So far, Pizer is simply telling us what we know about Europe. Yes, Jews are afraid and anti-Semitism is on the rise in Europe. Then Pizer gives the kicker. And in France, she writes, whose 500,000 strong Jewish population is the largest on the European continent, a mob descended on a Paris synagogue July 13th to demonstrate against Israeli bombings in Gaza, which were carried out in self-defense against rockets fired by the terrorist group Hamas. To be sure, even some Jews oppose Israel's occupation of the territories claimed by the Palestinians. She concludes with a CBS News piece by Scott Paley. And here he says it, she's quoting him. Earlier this month, CBS Evening News did something shocking. Network personnel told an uncomfortable truth. As Jews prepared to observe Yom Kippur, anchorman Scott Paley told how armed guards were stationed outside synagogues in Germany amid furious acts of anti-Semitism across Europe that started with Israel's battles in Gaza. Chants were heard that echoed from Germany's darkest time, said reporter Mark Phillips. Jew, Jew, cowardly pig, they say. Much of the time, incendiary street rhetoric has come from German Muslims, many recent immigrants, Phillips says. She ends with the following statement. Is any place safe? French Jews just want to survive. How powerful. So we are left asking the question, how much longer can Jews live in Europe? The next column is called Unserious War Against ISIS by Mark Gusinger and John Stillion, published in the Wall Street Journal, October 15th, 2014. Both Gusinger and Stillion are senior fellows at the Center for Strategic and Budgetary Assessments. They begin powerfully. They say, since U.S. planes first struck targets in Iraq on August 8th, a debate has raged over the effectiveness of the Obama administration's air campaign against Islamic State. But debate is now beginning to focus on the apparent failure of the airstrikes to halt the terror group's advances in Iraq and Syria, especially Islamic State's pending seizure of Kobani on the Syrian border with Turkey. Now they give numbers, and these numbers will knock your socks off. Here's what they say. While it is still too early to proclaim the air campaign against Islamic State a failure, it may be instructive to compare it with other campaigns conducted by the U.S. military since the end of the Cold War that were deemed successes. For instance, during the 43-day Desert Storm air campaign against Saddam Hussein's forces in 1991, the coalition fighters and bombers flew 48,224 strike sorties. The authors then explain that this translates to roughly 1,100 sorties a day. 12 years later, the 31-day air campaign that helped free Iraq from Saddam's government averaged more than 800 offensive sorties a day. By contrast, over the past 2 months, U.S. aircraft and a small number of partner forces have conducted 412 strikes in Iraq and Syria, an average of 7 strikes a day. With the Islamic State in control of an area approaching 50,000 square miles, it is easy to see why this level of effort has not had much impact on its operations. They continue. Of course, air operations during Desert Storm and Iraqi Freedom were each supported by a massive coalition force on the ground. Thus, it may be more appropriate to compare current operations against the Islamic State with the 78-day air campaign against Serbian forces and their proxies in 1999, or the 75-day air campaign in Afghanistan that was instrumental in forcing the Taliban out of power in 2001. Now get this, this is the weird part. These are the numbers. 7 per day versus 1,100 or 800 per day in similar operations. This is a brilliant analysis, and the numbers tell the entire story. They end telling the reader the following. In the end, no matter the reason, the timorous use of air power against Islamic State fighters in Iraq and Syria is unlikely to reduce the territory under their control, curb the brutal murder of innocent civilians, or prevent the creation of a sanctuary for an enemy that has sworn to continue its fight on a more global scale. Coming up, commentary through cartoons, where pictures tell the story. The first cartoon is by Bob Gorrell. It's published October 16, 2014. It's a Creators Syndicate piece. Gorrell grew up in North Carolina. He was a cartoonist for AOL News actually. That gave him one of the biggest platforms in the English world. And he was one of the first online cartoonists. In this cartoon, it's about Obama's air defense. A paper airplane is flying toward an ISIS terrorist. In the trail of the paper plane, repeatedly are written the words, talk, 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 talk. It is a sad but true reality. Of course, the US-led coalition is more and more serious now, but it's still a lot of talk and far less action. Gorrell is biting in his critique. Next up is Chip Bach, also published on October 16, 2014, also from Creators Syndicate. Bach is from Akron, Ohio. Even a character who's very, very talented, wrote a children's book together with Helen Thomas from the UPI about a president's son in the White House. In this particular cartoon, you have a fence, and Turkey is depicted as a guy taking a picture on the other side of the fence. He's balding with a mustache. On the other side of the fence is a guy on his knees dressed in orange. Written on his uniform, his orange uniform, is the word Kurds. And an ISIS executioner in black, with only his eyes visible, holding a knife, about to decapitate him, is there. And all the while, the Turk is taking a picture. A powerful, powerful interpretation by Bach of this particular situation. The Turks stand and watch, and even if they're involved, it's only peripherally. The third piece is actually from Hamas. And this one's a little confusing, because what we have here is the Hamas Palestine Information Center, the PIC, is using a Haredi ultra-Orthodox propaganda picture, and a whole series of them, but this is the one that I'm showing you right now, about the Israeli army. The original Haredi cartoon is in Hebrew, depicting the IDF, the Israeli army, as pigs. Hamas takes the cartoon, substitutes Arabic tags to it. This is a very interesting nexus, one which is very hard to grasp. The ultra-Orthodox are trying to confront the recruitment of their kids into the army. And with this cartoon, Hamas is trying to show how even Israelis do not respect the IDF. Hamas is extremely adroit at co-opting other people's and other groups' pictures and ideas for their own propaganda. In a moment, my own perspective and a few predictions. I want to think out loud with you now. The tables have been turned. 2.5 years ago, Islamic terrorists of the Muslim Brotherhood were blowing up the natural gas pipeline that led from Egypt to Israel. They were upset that Egypt was providing gas to Israel. 30 months later, Israel and Egypt have signed an agreement. This time, Israel is providing Egypt with natural gas. That's why the tables are turned, using the very same pipeline that the terrorists were blowing up. But now the pipeline is more secure. At least Egyptian President al-Sisi believes he can provide the line, the protection it needs. And so over the next 3 years, Israel will regularly provide a minimum of 5 million cubic meters of natural gas to Egypt. Egypt is in trouble. They have not yet recovered from their internal turmoil and crisis. Egyptian economy is, especially their oil and natural gas industry, their energy industry in general, is dependent on outsiders to jumpstart their economy and their energy industry. And it's barely moved. People are afraid to come into Egypt in order to do that. Egypt has a long way to go. They need to import. And the perfect partner is Israel, which is now marketing their newly discovered natural gas resources. Strange, but true. Just the way things tend to happen in the Middle East. Things get twisted around. The next thing I've been thinking about is New York City imams. The other day, a mind-boggling event took place. A dozen imams from New York City gathered on the steps of City Hall. They announced that they were going to fight extremism. This is a huge step for the Muslim community and for Muslims living in the United States. The imams announced that Islamic law absolutely forbids acts of terror and violence against innocent people. The leader of the Islamic Leadership Council of Metropolitan New York, Imam El-Hajj Talib Abdur Rashid, explained in front of a huge press conference and all of the people in his group, the other imams, that the group would now start a serious educational campaign to combat extremism. They would use the web to counter extremist propaganda. In addition, they will educate their constituency about balance, especially the need to balance public safety issues and constitutional issues with Muslim issues. Now, I'm going to monitor them. I'm going to monitor what they're doing. I obviously monitor the extremism on the internet and on the web of Muslim extremists. So I'm going to monitor what this group is doing, and I hope that they confront them. I wish them good luck and great success. So far, they have received no death threats from Muslim extremists. You see, up until now, death threats tended to silence those who were considered moderates in the Muslim world. We've thought out loud about a lot today. Now that you know what I've been thinking, let me know what you're thinking. Email me at micah@jbstv.org. Tweet me at Micah Halpern. Tell me what you think. Before we end, let me leave you with one piquante piece of information. The Hebrew calendar is actually based on the lunar calendar. It works according to the moon. It can have anywhere between 353 or 354 days in a year. It's about 11 days shorter than the Gregorian solar year. A Hebrew month can have 29 or 30 days to it. But during leap years, the Hebrew calendar adds a month so that the year is anywhere between 353 days or 385 days, depending on the Hebrew leap year, which would be 13 months. It's the way that we correct the calendar to make certain that the seasons are in the right times of the year, because Passover, of course, must be in the spring, and Sukkot must be in the fall. Just as an aside, Muslims do not correct their lunar calendar. Thank you for thinking out loud with me, Micah Halpern. Let's think out loud again next week on JBS.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support Shalom TV on JBS with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double high or more, to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media. Simply visit the JBS website homepage and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check made out to GEM, P.O. Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York, 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.